Well, for more on the state of the economy and what we can expect, I'm joined by economist Dr. Peter Baur from the University of Johannesburg. Dr. Baur, very good afternoon. I've had several conversations around what can we expect for 2023, but up front, I'd like us to focus on the underprivileged members of our communities. The students that are studying for their matric this year, the university students. What does that horizon, what does that landscape look like for those people?
For many of the students, I believe it's actually going to be quite a challenging year for them. The biggest problem is literally the cost of education, be it direct and indirect. There are younger students who often have access to bursaries provided through the state, but then you also have students who unfortunately need to find ways of funding that. And then, of course, you have to look at the issues of, students' residence, cost of textbooks, etc. And for most of these students, those costs are actually going up. The transport of getting to campus is now becoming also more challenging. The living costs have gone up. Price of food has gone up. Households themselves this year are under incredible pressure. So we're most likely going to be seeing that many students who would have planned or would prefer to go to university this year might find themselves more compromised by the cost of living, the challenges that are associated with the economy, and may find it more difficult this year. And that, of course, is a huge loss to our economy.
Now, when many of us studied, you'd have a program and you'd say to yourself, okay, I'm going to get home, I'm going to play, and then come evening, I'm going to study for a few hours from 7 or 8 p.m. until 10 p.m. But trying to do that now, how do you do that in the dark?
That is extremely, extremely difficult for the students. This really is. I know that the university, for example, University of Johannesburg, we do have study centers. We try to make sure that we can provide as much light as possible. So we provide places for the students to study. But many of the students who are studying from home, it's a different picture. It's a lot more difficult for them. And because of the irregularity of the load shedding, so some days it's at 4 o'clock, other days at 6 o'clock, this may disrupt routines to a large degree, and this is also going to affect the students. So the students are going to be finding it considerably tougher as well to not only afford the technology, but when they've got the technology, many of these assignments need to be done online. They have to use computers. And so it's not just about reading a textbook anymore. Now there's a lot more interactive material that students need to work with. And this is actually going to affect them in a very, very big way. Bringing in, of course, the cost of data is going to be a challenge. But I think this load shedding and the way and the stages where we are affecting all of us on so many different levels, and especially the quality that the students are getting from the system. Already we saw in the years before that students would have to adjust their own timetables. Students were awake all night, busy studying and learning, trying to take advantage, and during the day, of course, the schedule changes, and then, of course, this does become quite disruptive, both for the household and the student.
Now, do you expect the central bank to revise its targets on possible growth or the growth rate of the economy? Bearing in mind that I doubt very much that they would have considered that the economy at the moment is going to be exposed to just half the amount of work hours as far as power is concerned. I mean, at stage 6 load shedding.
Yes, absolutely. And we can see that comes through in the productivity. And productivity is a really big, important concept of economic growth. In order to, it's not just about the labor hours, but the quality of the labor hours. And so load shedding is impacting on the productivity levels of people working, and of course businesses, small businesses, employ them during these times. They're sitting with these additional costs. Now, on the one side, you've got the cost of obviously trying to find alternative energy supplies, but the additional costs that are associated with this could be that we're not producing as many goods within a given time, and that makes the relative production lines increases the cost of those relative production lines. So your relative costs are going up, not just through, as I said, the alternatives, but through the loss of those hours. And this is going to put huge pressure on businesses to survive. Many businesses are going to literally risk foreclosure, and that's going to put people, unfortunately, into the streets again. If there's this consistent energy crisis is also impacting investor confidence. And we're looking at how do we encourage investors to bring their money into South Africa, given the challenging dynamics that they're going to face. And naturally, this is going to filter right down to the household, and it's going to and the poorer the household, the more it's going to impact them. And unfortunately, the nature of this particular crisis does, as always, affect the poorer households more than the wealthier homes. And so this becomes this perpetuating challenge that we're going to be experiencing.
Well, you raised two important issues, Dr. Baur, and the first issue obviously is around convincing foreign direct investment or foreign direct investors to come to South Africa. And we know that President Cyril Ramaphosa is in Davos at the moment, so huge conversations or big conversations for him to have. How do you convince the world to come to a country that can only give you half the amount of power that you would like? And then a little bit earlier, my colleague Zigono Chona was in Katlehong, where she was speaking to some SMMEs who are facing numerous challenges in that they cannot refrigerate their stocks because there is no Eskom, there is no power, and half the time they're having to throw away stuff, which are huge expenses.
Yes. For the investor, I think we're going to have to really look at it from a relative perspective. So when we're comparing countries in the moment, there are relative costs associated there too. So if we take a look at the global economy, we see what is happening post-COVID. We've seen the growth of the Ukraine conflict. We've seen the escalation of energy prices, which are now starting to balance out and even in some cases coming down again. But we've also seen the impact on potential financial markets. There's been a talk since last year already about the possibility of a global recession. America and the European Union are both, strategizing on how to avoid this challenge. Now, when the investors take a look at places for location, they're going to consider these alternatives, and many of the emerging markets are considered a good alternative for investors to hedge their risk against the crisis that they're going to be facing in other parts of the world. So what we may see is even given the nature of the load shedding and the kind of business, the business environment that this load shedding has impacted on, including the extension into the infrastructure, we're possibly going to see investment taking place, moving into the emerging markets. And South Africa is definitely a place for investment.
Well, Dr. Baur, I'd like to interject and then obviously bring another question into this. The privatization of Eskom, or at least some external funding for Eskom. Now, you talk about the situation that we find ourselves in, offers a great opportunity to investors from outside the continent. Could this be a conversation, then, that President Cyril Ramaphosa has in Davos with potential investors about either putting money into Eskom or alternative energy?
Absolutely, and I think it's the private sector's responsibility to actually support now the role of our state-owned enterprises, and I think there's a huge gap for our private sector to come on board. I think there's going to be a lot around in terms of how we're going to structure the framework, the sharing, this partnership maybe developing between private and public sector. But this alternative is really, really, really necessary in order to bolster that investment. I mean, we've already seen an 18.6% increase in investment as of the end of last year. But I reckon that if we could bolster that energy sector, there are opportunities. It's just slow in the moment, slow in the making, and that increases the relative cost of the energy that we're producing.
Dr. Peter Baur, appreciate you unpacking those issues for us. Dr. Peter Baur from the University of Johannesburg.